was working as a corporate lawyer, and I was really kind of struggling. I felt really disconnected from people. I felt disconnected from humanity. I felt this real lack of community in my life, and I was feeling so like out of alignment, is how I like to explain it, that I did my life audit, which is a tool that I use, which allows me to kind of go deep into the different pillars that we actually explore on the podcast. So health, wealth, and community. And I give myself, I analyze different parts of the things that make up those sort of pillars. And so in the community element, this lack of connection was so low, one of the lowest scores actually. And I just felt like I wasn't giving back. I wasn't, because that's a big part also, like kind of philanthropy, giving back is really important ethos for me. And I just didn't feel like I was doing that. So I did a little brainstorming exercise where I was like, okay, what are some of my gifts and my skills? And what are things that just come really naturally to me? And I was like, I love connecting with people. I love talking with people. Like, I just love hearing their stories. And I also love like learning from it and then telling other people about what I've learned. So I was like, okay, how can I use this like skill of like connecting and talking in like in some way? And then it was like, oh, talk show host. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, oh, how can I use this? And then it was like, oh my gosh, podcasting. Oh, that's interesting. So that is really the nascence of the podcast. Hi, EnvisionAirs. Welcome to the 50th episode of the EnvisionAir Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Ng Yuen, and I am beyond excited to be celebrating this incredible milestone with you all today. It's hard to believe that we've reached our 50th episode. And I honestly could not have done it without all of you, for all of your support, your love, and your encouragement. Thank you so much for showing up every week and remaining curious about life and the world. And thank you so much for listening, whether you listen on Apple or Spotify, or you watch us on YouTube. Every time you listen, it means so much to us. So thank you so much again. This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered to be medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice.
This podcast does not encourage or endorse any illegal activity.
We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the information in this podcast.
The views explored in the podcast may not always be those of the host.
Today's episode is going to be a bit different and extra special, as I wanted to mark this occasion by inviting a very special guest host. This person is someone who is no stranger to the EnvisionAir family, as he's been on the EnvisionAir podcast before. And he's honestly one of the kindest and most generous people I've gotten to know. And I'm pleased to call him my friend. The guest host is Dr. Dave Madow. Woo woo! And you might remember his episode that the topic was on microdosing magic mushrooms, where Dr. Dave shared very candidly his own story of discovering microdosing mushrooms 4 years ago to help with anxiety and depression he was facing. And I really appreciated him being on the podcast. And he has his own podcast that's called Microdose You, which not only covers all aspects of microdosing, but also offers some really inspiring advice and information related to overall health and well-being. So if you haven't checked out the episode we did in February of this year, please go check it out. And if you haven't checked out Dr. Dave's podcast, go check it out, because honestly, it's so interesting. So today, Dr. Dave will be taking over as host and interviewing me this time. We're going to be reflecting on the journey of the podcast, sharing invaluable insight gathered from a long list of 47 amazing guests over 50 episodes. And we're going to be discussing some of the challenges and opportunities of running independent podcasts. So without further ado, I'm handing over the reins to you, Dr. Dave. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for having me here. You don't really know what kind of an honor this is. When you asked me to host your podcast, I'm thinking, wow, incredible. So thanks for having me. And hello, all Envisionairs. Envisionairs, you guys are really cool. I've listened to many of the episodes, and I was a guest. And what a great podcast Nicole is running there. So yes, it's my pleasure to be here as your guest host for this milestone event, 50th episode. Today, we're going to dive deep into the journey of the EnvisionAir podcast, celebrating its growth, achievements, and probably everything in between. So, Nicole, I'll start off by let's start. It makes sense to start at the beginning. So, I'm going to ask you what actually inspired you to start the EnvisionAir podcast, and how has that vision, I should say, evolved over time?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it started about 3 years ago. And it's an interesting one because I was working as a corporate lawyer and I was really kind of struggling. I felt really disconnected from people. I felt disconnected from humanity. I felt this real lack of community in my life. And I don't know, I was really feeling down about this. And because obviously, for those who, I've shared the story before a little bit in different solo episodes, but essentially, I was struggling. I didn't feel like I was supported by, as supported as I could have been as a junior lawyer. And what was really interesting is when you are a corporate lawyer, especially in private practice, it really is all about the metrics and it's all about the billable hours. And billable hours essentially means like work done for clients. And the problem is that a lot of the work that you do for clients is like by yourself at a desk, contracts and, share form agreements and all these different, really, really kind of just like dry contracts that you're doing by yourself. And you don't really get rewarded for, engaging in conversation with your colleagues or, the secretaries or anyone around you. You're just kind of basically meant to just kind of get your head down and do the work. And obviously it's intellectually rigorous. And so I appreciated some elements of that. But I was really feeling disconnected from people. And some of the highlights of my day when I was working private practice was actually like having chats with like the secretary, like learning about their histories, their stories and like their life journeys. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Like, why can't I talk more about this? Why can't I get rewarded to talk about this? Instead, it's like, no, go to your desk and sit down and just, put your head down and do these contracts. So I felt it was this very disconnect, I guess, in my own life. And then I did what I've talked about before, which is my life audit, because I was feeling so down. I was feeling so like out of alignment, is how I like to explain it, that I did my life audit, which is a tool that I use, which allows me to kind of go deep into the different pillars that we actually explore on the podcast. So health, wealth, and community. And I give myself, I analyze different parts of the things that make up those sort of pillars. And so in the community element, this lack of connection was so low, one of the lowest scores actually. And I just felt like I wasn't giving back. I wasn't, because that's a big part also, like kind of philanthropy, giving back is really important ethos for me. And I just didn't feel like I was doing that. So I was like, how can I? So then I was like, okay, this is an area I really need to work on. Right. And I didn't want to give up my job because obviously there were some, there were some good things obviously that I enjoyed about my job, but I was like, I'm feeling very unfulfilled. So I did a little brainstorming exercise where I was like, okay, what are some of my gifts and my skills? And what are things that just come really naturally to me? And I was like, I love connecting with people. I love talking with people. Like, I just love hearing their stories. And I also love like learning from it and then telling other people about what I've learned. So I was like, okay, how can I use this like skill of like connecting and talking in like in some way? And then it was like, oh, talk show host. And I was like, okay, that's great. That feels very ambitious. Given that I'm in the UK and I don't have anyone in the entertainment world. that I know. Anyway, and so I was like, oh, how can I use this? And then it was like, oh my gosh, podcasting. Oh, that's interesting. So that is really the nascence of the podcast, because that was when this idea of like, oh, a podcast. Okay, let me look into this. And then when I started learning about independent podcasters and how you can actually do it like in your home and you don't have to have like a studio, I was like, this is perfect. So that was really the when it was born. So about 3 years ago, like kind of just at the beginning of lockdown or in the middle, like the first year of lockdown.
So yeah, that's really interesting, Nicole. And you've done 50 episodes, which by the way is incredible. You know, you've stuck with this. A lot of podcasters, you know, you and I have been doing this for some time, but a lot of podcasters have the idea and they start and they record a few episodes and then don't get any traction and then they just quit. I think that seems to be the norm. But so congratulations, 50 episodes is amazing, and you're going strong. You're not stopping anytime soon. I wanted to ask you about so, you know, over the 50 episodes, some of the key moments or turning points. But before I do that, something that you just said, I'm really curious about, Nicole. Do you feel, I mean, since you started the podcast and you've got 50 episodes under your belt now, how has that helped you? Do you feel more connected with people? Is your like overall life better now that you've been podcasting, and has it like mitigated some of the, I don't know whether loneliness is the right word, but just sitting at a desk reviewing contracts, has it helped with that, with all of that?
Yeah, 100%. Yes. And that's such a good question because I have considered that too. And I have to say, like, it has been one of the most enriching things I've ever done in my whole life, honestly. And I feel like so many podcasters, you go to podcast conferences or you hear them talk, and I used to hear them describe this. And I would say in the last, I guess, 2 to 3 months, even for like this year, I would say, like, there was a real turning point where I started going, wow, like, I'm looking at my circle of, you know, friends. I'm looking at my circle of my community and new people that I've met, just such amazing, like yourself, for example, obviously, but also, I mean, you and all the guests that I've been able to interview. I mean, just this wealth of knowledge, diversity in terms of like work experience, life experience, but also, I mean, there's so much commonality with all the guests, I would say, is that, and we can talk about that later. But essentially, I found that the guests are so generous of spirit. Those are the ones who I've really have come on, who have either been attracted to the podcast and or who I've really sought out, are very, very generous. And that is something that I was really lacking when I did my life audit. It was like, I'm a very generous person. And I was like, wow, you know, bar a handful of people, very close people circle. You know, I felt like my circle, just was not very, I don't know. It didn't feel like it was a very generous place. It wasn't a generous circle. Whereas now when I look at the people in my life, I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful. I have so many amazing new friends, but also I've made space for people to come in who are wonderful, just absolutely wonderful. So yeah, so 100% my like, it's so good. It's been so enriching. And I'm sure you have experienced that too, haven't you?
I have. This is not my first podcast. Microdose U is not my first. I've done podcasting in dentistry, as maybe, I don't know if your listeners know or remember, but I was a dentist, and not only that, but a speaker in the national and international speaker in the dental profession as well. So I've done a lot of podcasting there. And also I've had a lifestyle podcast. So I've been doing it for quite some time. And I got to tell you, my current project with Microdose U, I'm just so passionate about it. I was telling somebody the other day, I love what I do. Every time I turn this mic on or turn the camera on, I just immerse myself in this and try to give my listeners and viewers like 150%. And so it's really helped me a lot as well. And if I can throw it back the other way, I want to share something with your listeners and viewers. And I don't say this lightly at all, but you remember, Nicole, when you interviewed me for your show back in February, I believe it was February, I said to you, and look, I'm going to make it clear, I get interviewed a pretty good amount. There are people that interview me for to be on their shows, and I just came off of an interview, like I think the day before, which I didn't think went real smoothly, but I said to you, you are a really good interview. And I think we spoke for 45 minutes to an hour, and it was smooth. And you actually got me to tell my story better than I could for anybody else because you're a good listener and your questions were well thought out. So I want to applaud you for the 50, not only the 50 episodes, but just the way you do what you do with professionalism and care. And the questions you ask are just beautiful. And that's why I hope I can be doing this with you on your 100th episode. Let's make it.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. We're going to manifest that. I mean, it's done. Okay. It's done. 100th episode.
It's on my calendar right now. I already put it on my calendar. I project it out to when I think you're going to have your 100th episode. I've got it on my calendar right now.
Amazing.
But I do want to ask you, this is very important. I want to ask you, over your 50 episodes, what are some of the key moments or turning points that kind of helped you get to this milestone of 50?
Yeah. You know what? Well, okay. First of all, I'm going to respond to your beautiful comment because that was so nice. Like, I just so appreciate that. And I think it means a lot coming from you. You have a lot of experience as well. And I really do. I look up to you. I look to you as a mentor as well as my friend. And I think what you've done with Microdose U, which the listeners should know, Microdose U is top 3%, if not even not 1%. Is it 1% now? It's
on listen notes. It's been top 1% for
what? Oh my gosh.
But you're okay. You're going to be there soon. I know that you're going to, I think you're going to be talking about your goals. So I don't want to spill the beans. We had like a little pre-con talking about what you're going to talk about. So, but I'm telling you something, Nicole, from what I've seen, you're going to be there with no trouble whatsoever.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I welcome that. But I will say so I do look up to you. So anyway, this is like a big love fest, but I will say, I really do appreciate what your very kind words, and thank you very much. And yeah, I received that. So thank you. Okay. Yes. So how do we get, you know what? I'll tell you something that was really important for me. So the first year we launched, the podcast, there was a lot going on. My father had passed away. So in 2021, and then there was so much stuff going on that year. And then I launched the September of 2022. So I felt like I was in a better space to do it. But then what was kind of crazy was that we actually moved house at like 2-3 months later. But then what was wild was that the house that we were supposed to buy, the sale fell through. And then we were without a home for like 4 months. And so everything was in storage. All of my podcasting stuff was in storage. And I couldn't podcast anymore. So I had released like 3 or 4 episodes, and with the intention that the whole season was going to, get released subsequently thereafter. It just didn't happen. Anyway, thankfully we found our now house. Great. Love it. And then I had this like intentional, I was like very intentional. I was like, September, I'm going to relaunch. It's going to be season 2. So like I finished season 1, it kind of drip fed throughout the year. And then I was like, season 2, we're going to be on it. And it's going to be every week, weekly. I'm going to commit to doing that. Like, come hell or high water, this is happening. I don't even care if it has to be me talking for 10 minutes. It's going to happen. Thankfully, it didn't have to come to that. But essentially, I just made a commitment once a week for a year. And so we're kind of like, I think 10 months in. And I really do think that kind of commitment to doing it it just gathered so much momentum. And also, I really feel like energetically, I'm really big into energy. I think you are too. But this idea of like, when you create the space, like magical things can start happening. And I have to say, like, when I committed to it, it's like all these amazing guests started I would reach out to some people, but the fact that they would say yes was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? They said yes, and then like, including yourself. And then there were, but then in the last like 6 to 7 months, there's been a lot of people reaching out now, which is so, and again, it's like that energy, you're just kind of creating it, not only in my everyday practice of doing the podcast, but also like, I think I'm creating energy in like the universe to say like, I'm ready, I'm willing, I'm here. And yeah, it's really quite special what can happen when you actually just kind of really commit and then leave the rest in the universe's hands.
Wow. Incredible. And I know now, I think you said you're in like over 40 countries, and I don't even know how you measure this one, but I think you told me 370 different cities across the world. And you're now Yeah, I mean, and you're now ranked as a top 10%, which, by the way, let me tell you something. Out of the gate, as a 10% podcast is really good, Nicole. So please,
Thank
I know
you.
you're gonna get to that 1% for sure. So you're doing an incredible job. But so what has it been like to see your audience grow globally? Because you've got people all over this planet listening to your show, and how's this impacted the way that you would approach each episode?
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm just so grateful that like people listen and then continue to show up again. And so if you're listening from around the world, thank you so much. It really means a lot. And I hope the value is you're getting value from the podcast. Um, I feel like I don't know, this is going to sound a little crazy. But I do feel like I'm a global citizen, and I always have, because I'll tell you why. So like my background, like even from an ethnicity perspective, my dad is Chinese and my mom, or was Chinese, and my mom is half Indian and half Black from Trinidad and Tobago. So, and I was born and raised in Canada, and now I live in the UK. My husband is British. And it's like, I have always, and even when I was growing up, people used to give me the nickname United Nations because of like, this very, all encompassing, different continents background. And so I always feel like I am a citizen of the world, and I feel like I can connect with a lot of people because like I have the Canadian sort of North American roots, but then I also obviously appreciate my Caribbean and Chinese background. And then I have this very strong connection to like my African roots because well, I guess I don't know, I just have that in some ways, different ways, because I think I do look like, even though some people say, oh, you look a little, they can see a little Asian, but then also, oh, I can see a little, the African and, Indian too. Like, it's just really interesting. And then I speak French. I grew up speaking French. Because of I went to a French school in Canada. So I think I don't know. I've always thought to myself, like I am just like a child of the world. So for that reason, I hope that I can like continue to reach more and more people. But I think that also what I also hope is that the topics that we talk about are so universal, even though they are, there's elements of it that are very specific, but they're quite universal. And I think the listeners often are very intellectually curious, and they are empathetic, and they are just like, they're truth seekers. And I think hopefully what the podcast offers them, and that is across borders, that's just like, that is humanity, right? It's like this idea of connection and truth seeking and kindness, but also like intellectually curiosity. So that's kind of why I hope it resonates with people, and I hope it continues to, but I hope that's the reason why it's grown.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. I knew you were somewhat multicultural, but I didn't realize if that's the right word, how multicultural you really are. I mean, that's incredible, very diverse, and it got me thinking. I mean, I think I'm at a tremendous disadvantage as a podcast because I'm just a white guy from America. I mean, I've got nothing, and I speak English, and I may a little. I'm studying Japanese, so I don't know how far that'll get me, but I've got like, I need to get my game together here because you've got that on me a lot.
Yeah. No, well, you know what? Look, I mean, you have obviously your beautiful wife, Yoko. And so hello, Yoko, if she's listening. And I think, I don't know, you've obviously grown, and but I do feel like you are also a global citizen. I do feel that way because you know why? You have a beautiful energy that just radiates like across, you know what I'm saying? So like, I don't think you have to worry too much.
Yeah, but I'm not going to be able to pull it off if I try to tell my audience I'm partially a person of color. So I'm not going to pull it off. No, nobody's going to ever believe that from me. So we'll get on to the next question.
Cultural appropriation.
Whatever. I'm so politically incorrect anyway. I'm probably using all the wrong terminology. But something, it's all good. We just roll that way, right? So But I'm also impressed because I think you also mentioned to me that you've interviewed in your 50 episodes, this being number 50, you've interviewed 47 guests.
Yeah.
from around the world. That's pretty amazing. Send some my way. I need to interview some of your guests, I think. But anyway,
Yeah, definitely.
but before you do that, I do want to ask you about these 47 guests that you've interviewed. Can you share some of, I'd say, like the most inspiring advice or lessons that you learned from all these conversations you've had podcasting?
Okay, so I like to think, I was thinking about this a lot of, recently, and I went back and I listened to like all of the episodes again. And I swear I was like, I even went back to season 1. Okay. And I was like thinking, oh, it's going to be like cringeworthy, because like that's what you think. You think it's going to be cringeworthy because I think, my skills aren't going to be very good. And like, maybe my audio is not going to be great. But you know what? I'll tell you something. I don't know whether or not that was the case. I was listening and I was thinking, wow, this is really good. And maybe I was laughing along, and it was just actually really nice. All of the guests that I've interviewed since season 1 to now have brought so much practical advice on every topic that we've talked about. There's always been so many nuggets of information. So it really felt hard for me to decide, like, here are a handful of ones that really resonated with me. So I thought about this and I said, you know what, instead, what I'd like to do is I'd like to share some common themes that I've seen essentially, throughout all the different guests and what they've shared. And so some of the themes that came to mind were to be authentic and embrace everything about yourself, even the things you think are negative. It's actually what makes you unique. And these are just, again, this is like this sort of wisdom was threaded throughout so many conversations that I had. Another one was, don't be afraid to speak up for what you think is right, whether that's, in your job, whether that's in a medical situation. Remember our conversation, you talked about this idea of, you really had to take on, be your own advocate for your own health when you were, thinking about getting empowered and learning about microdosing. So it's this idea of speaking up for what you think is right, or speaking, or, and being empowered, essentially. That's a second theme. And then the third thing is remaining curious about the things that you don't understand and asking questions, because this could open you up completely to a new way of thinking and also new opportunities. And then I guess if I was going to say a final one is that, it's so important for us to have human connection, and love is this sort of common theme. So human connection and love are so, so important to us as humans that we just really need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to not only like love others, but also love ourselves. So like self-love. So those are the 4 common themes, I would say, that I found throughout all of the conversations that I've had. And there's been just so much wisdom in each episode. And I've loved it. Like, honestly, from a purely selfish perspective, I was like, oh, like I could just listen to my podcast and like genuinely, I would be so happy. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, there's so much wisdom.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because listening to your own podcast is really, really powerful on many levels, because it helps you out. If you've made a mistake, if you need to improve a technique or the way, something like that helps. But also, like you said, you get the information again, and you hear your whole style. And I'm impressed that you've interviewed 47 people already, and I'm impressed that you remembered a little segment in conversation with me. I mean, that in itself tells me that, wow, you really care about what you're not just doing this and then forgetting and never listening. You honestly care about what your guests are saying to you and to your audience. And that means that you really care about your audience. You're not just putting junk out there just for the sake of putting stuff out. So again, congratulations. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thanks.
I do know also, again, both of us we're doing similar things. Running a podcast definitely has its own set of challenges. And so I'm wondering also, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced? And not only that, when you do face them, how have you been able to overcome them? What have you done to overcome them?
Good one. That's a good question. Well, I am very not technology has been something I've had to really embrace wholeheartedly, which actually I'm happy that I did, because I feel like probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I was almost like I was not on social media. I was not involved, like technology, this idea of setting up mics and cameras and all these things was so foreign to me. And it's still, I mean, in some ways I still fight it. To be honest with you, my editor, I had a convo with him, and he's kind of stepping into like more of almost even a producer role. It's very nice actually. And he was like telling me, he's like, look, we got to level it up. We got to start using cameras. And I was like, cameras? Because right now I'm using like my laptop, right? And I was like, cameras? And he was like, yeah, we need professional cameras. We need different angles. And I was like, whoa, this is very intense. But I'll tell you the reason I share that is because what I have learned doing the podcast is that all about this neuroplasticity element and this idea that like you need to do things that make you feel uncomfortable, because if you do them, you will stretch what your brain thinks you can do. And then things start becoming easier and easier, even new things that you didn't even think you could do before. So that is like, I have like a little mental block against certain elements of technology. But as soon as I kind of now push myself to do it and get uncomfortable, because I know that's going to serve me in the future. So anyway, long story short, I have a camera here. So that's like my new little camera. Oh, it's going to be, anyway, for those listening, I was just showing Dr. Dave my Canon camera. So TBC when I start using that. But he's forcing me, he messaged me today and he was like, have you done your tests? Have you done your tests yet with the camera? And I was like, no, but I will do them tonight. So after this podcast, I'm going to have to do them. Anyway, long story short, tech, definitely a big thing. And then the other, but I forced myself, and that's how I've kind of overcome it. And I have to say it's a lot easier nowadays. And then the second thing is probably just like the time management of it all. Like running an independent podcast, obviously I do have an editor, but like it's really contingent on me to do everything. And then I kind of just send the files over to him, at least for now. Hopefully eventually I have a team to work with, but you know how it is. Like you're recording everything. If you have guests, you are coordinating everything. You're sending the Zoom links, you're sending any consent forms, you're doing everything that you need to do. And it's a lot, it's a lot. And then I obviously have a full-time job. I work as a lawyer, and that can be the hours can be very hectic and, can work late depending on the work. So sometimes like I'm doing that whole like finish at 8 or 9 o'clock from my job. And then, I know from 9 o'clock until like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., I have to do stuff for the podcast, because like I have to upload it because the schedule is tomorrow and it's release day. And I don't want to disappoint people who are expecting an episode. So it's one of those things where you're always constantly feel like you're getting like pulled at, two ends of the candle. But again, what I've just done is I've kind of just get on with it, like I've just had to, like, I don't know another way. Like I don't know another way. So I don't know if what are some of the challenges you faced and how have you dealt with them? It'd be interesting to hear.
Well, something you just said is interesting, because I know when I get to the point where I've got an episode that needs to be dropped for the next morning, and I haven't done it by the night before, I get too anxious. So what I've done is I usually have a queue of episodes that are like ready to go, and what's a schedule. They're scheduled. Whether it's on YouTube or the audio, Spotify, Apple, all that. They're scheduled, ready to go. At least probably generally a week in advance makes me feel good. When I start getting, and I could do a little bit tighter, but when I start getting to the day before and these things aren't ready to go, I just don't want to be pressure like that. So I do mine early. And sometimes when I travel, I remember last year when I went to Japan for like 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I ended up recording almost all the episodes way in advance and having them all scheduled. I just didn't want to be in Japan thinking that, oh my, and then having to figure out what time it is back east, back in the US. And then if I haven't published something yet, I better get it scheduled. I didn't want to be under that pressure. So I'd say that's kind of I wouldn't say a struggle or a hurdle, but that's something having everything's recorded in advance and scheduled is a good thing for me at least. Don't have to deal with the number of guests that you have to deal with, and that would probably be difficult. You handle it really well. most of my episodes, I'd say probably 80 to 90% of my episodes is just me sitting at the mic, just like this, talking.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I do, Nicole, I just turn the mic on, and I know what I'm going to talk about, but it's not really scripted. I just turn the mic on and talk for 12 to 20 minutes about a certain topic. And I really enjoyed that. And I enjoy the guest part as well. But
Yeah.
most of mine are by myself. But I'm just trying to think of okay. I'll tell you what was the word we're using? I'm not using struggle, but like a hurdle.
Challenge?
A challenge. That's okay. Great word. Challenge. Great word. Okay. I'll tell you what my challenge is that I'm going to commit right here on the show. I'm going to get better at this.
Okay.
Sometimes, I don't know if you're like this either, or as well, sometimes I get too obsessed or hung up with the stats. Like, oh, how did this episode do? How many people listened or watched this one? And you know something? It shouldn't really matter, because let's just use an extreme example. Let's say even only one person watches one of my episodes. Well, guess what? That one person is following me and cares about what I say. So I should say and feel the exact same way if I was podcasting for one person or thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah.
So I think we all as podcasters get a little bit too hung up on the stats. And in the end, it's, if we put everything, our heart and soul, into every episode, the stats really should not matter that much to us. It's that we're just helping people, however many we're helping the people.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And you know what? That has been something that I think has continued to spur me on as well, because, you know, in my mind, like when I said, okay, I committed, I was like, in a year's time, like I'm going to do this. And I'll be like, then I'll be like, I don't know if you know this person, but I was like, then it'll be like Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. Do you know him? Has he made his way out west? No,
I don't
it's okay.
know.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But it's basically like, it's essentially like in the UK, this gentleman has become like Joe Rogan big, if that makes sense. Like very, very big. And he has major guests on now, and he's grown really quickly within 2 years, I would say. But that said, this is like, and he has said it on his like YouTube channels. He's like, I think his team of podcast team is like 20 or 40 people. Like it's huge. It's huge. So in my mind, it's obviously like, yes, it's nice to have these big dreams and to be like, think big, you know, but equally it's like crazy. Cause then I'm like 6 months in and I'm like, why hasn't it like, you know, gone viral and like taken over the internet and broken the internet? Well, you know, but then going back to this idea of like, you know what, if I'm helping, just one person, 10 people, 20 people, 40 people, amazing, you know, and we've talked about this before, this idea of like, and I can't remember, was it you that I heard talking about this on a podcast? But it was this idea of like, if you think that you have like 40 people or 20 people or 50, whatever the number is in a room, and they're showing up for you, it's like, wow, that's so actually quite humbling, and actually like quite nice to know that people are just getting value in something you're sharing or doing. So that's, I try and remember that, especially if I don't see that exponential growth that I'm expecting, you know? So yeah.
It's totally true. Just think, if you threw a little event, a book signing or anything like that, and 10 people showed up, just 10 people, those 10 people put it on their calendar. They made it a point to get in their car, drive to the venue, see you, meet you, talk to you. That's major. That's major. So I think we always need to keep things in perspective and be humble just by the number, you know, the people 100%. That follow us. I'm curious. So I see you were talking about your editor, and he sounds pretty cool. Like, and the tech issues you have, some because maybe you're not into the whole tech thing. But I'm curious. Share with me and with all your EnvisionAir listeners and viewers, what does your space actually look like? So where you're actually brought. I know, because the very first podcast I ever did, I did it like in my closet in my old house, because the acoustics were the best in the closet. But so share with us a little bit, just like, where are you and where are you doing this from? And I also want to know a little bit more about additional cameras. Like, what's the purpose? You just want to get like, you want to have different angles that they're showing you from in different parts of the show. Let's hear a little bit about your space and cameras.
Okay. Love it. Okay. So this room that I'm in, it's our office. So it's called like a box room in the UK. Like that's what they call it. So like in our house, there's always like a box room normally, especially because it's like a townhouse, right? So it's not like a huge like estate. And the box room is very small. I think like you could fit a single bed in here comfortably, right? Um, but it used to be our joint office. And then my husband graciously, and I just started encroaching slowly, like setting up the podcast. And then he just basically relinquished the studio space very nicely. And like, yeah, the office space. So we do have a printer here. But that's like the only thing that he'll like come in and be like, I just need to print something. So that's very sweet of him. So yeah, so it's essentially, it's small, but it's nice. I feel like I should probably treat it acoustically in some way, but haven't gotten to that point yet. So yeah, so not in a closet, and maybe that would actually be doing it in a closet would provide better audio. But anyway, hey ho, we're here. Desk. I have a proper desk. This is also my office that I transform into and use for work. So actually, like there's a monitor next to me as well. My camera, like my laptop is here. And so, yeah, I mean, I love having, this is like the logo of the podcast, and to people listening, I'm pointing to the beautiful painting that I have, which there's a story I can share very quickly with you guys about that. But yeah, so it's kind of a nice little studio space, perfect for podcasting, especially remote podcasting. I'd love to eventually at some point do like a proper studio. But we'll see. And the purpose for the cameras that my editor was saying is that, yeah, and he's great. He's really nice. And so thank you. Shout out Abuzar. But he was saying that in terms of like for the YouTube channel, it's always nice to have a little bit more like variety in terms of angles that, the viewer can see. So like face on is great, but if you can have a camera at one angle, like a side angle, and then another one, maybe even further away, that's a good thing. Again, I guess my only issue is that like the space is so small and it's quite messy. Actually, if I was being honest, I thought you were going to make me like turn the laptop and start showing. I was like, oh no, it's very, very messy. But anyway, but yes, so that's the thing. Oh, and I'll tell you about the photo very quickly because it's such a beautiful, it's a very beautiful story. So my dad had passed away, and I was thinking about this podcast and how to do the podcast, and it was really at the forefront. Now, my sister, and I don't know if she knows the story or not, but anyway, we were kind of in a difficult place at the time. It was very difficult, when a parent passes away, sometimes siblings stuff, it's very difficult and tenuous. Anyway, we're good now, so I'm not going to say too much about that. But essentially, we were in a really, not a great place, and I was feeling my dad's like energy around me a lot, like not in a weird way, not in a scary way, in a nice way. I was feeling a lot of guidance from him around that time. And I was walking to the grocery store. I just had a big argument with my sister. I was walking to the grocery store, and then like literally there was like this very conspicuous, is conspicuous the word? It's like there was this fox, and he was like staring at me, like in the parking lot, and it was so obvious, and he was like staring me down, and I was like, what is happening? And then I was like, Dad, is that you? I was like, Dad, is that you? Right? And honestly, I immediately got this like thing of like, stop fighting with your sister, like stop this is not good, you're not supposed to be doing this. It was like immediate, like I just had this thing, and it wasn't like I heard a voice. It was like the feeling. I was like, this is not good, I don't want you to do this, because there was, it was a lot of stuff about, the estate and everything, all that stuff. Right. And so I felt like my dad, that was like, it was really profound. And I was like, whoa, okay, hands up. Right. And then I was like, so it was this very beautiful kind of spiritual moment. And I'm just about to go into this like grocery store, and I look up, and it's the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. So I just took a photo with my camera, and that is literally, that is it. Like that is literally taken from my phone. So I just blew it up because I thought that was so beautiful. And it really symbolized this like envision, like envisioning your best life, envisioning something positive, good. And so anyway, there you go.
And is it for the viewers, is it intentional that you're wearing a matching sweater to that beautiful picture?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm wearing like a lilac purple. That is like, I feel like that's the color theme of the EnvisionAir podcast. Yeah, it is. It is definitely. Or this sort of maybe this like kind of pinky. I like the pink too. Yeah. Yeah. Nice one, Dave. Good for picking that up.
Beautiful. Well, so you talked about some of your challenges. Are there any accomplishments you want to mention briefly?
I think the biggest accomplishment, I'm very proud of myself, is it's not even what it is that I set a goal for myself and I'm doing it. You know, that's really, and there's always that's that old adage, it's an old saying that basically says like, it's not like making $1 million that is the accomplishment. It's the man or woman or person you become by doing that. Right. And so it's this idea of like, it's the journey. It really is the journey of this, because I am really, really just like proud of myself for having had this vision and having really pursued it, like knowing not only in myself that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but also like trusting the universe. And at this point, I'm like, wow, I'm just so proud of myself. You know, I hope we continue and I want to. That is the intention. But, you know, even at this point, I'm like, wow, I should be really proud of myself for that, you know?
Well, what you just said. It's a beautiful segue into my next question, because you talked about you hope you continue, and this is 50th episode. Other than having me on the 100th episode, what are your plans for the future? What are you going to be doing?
Well, this community is so beautiful, and I love the EnvisionAir community. So I'd really love to be able to grow it more and start doing some meetups, some in-person stuff. I'd also like to start hosting some like live workshops where we can work through some of the big sort of meaty issues, especially around pivoting your life. So like I think I might have mentioned this to you, and hopefully the listeners know, but I'm writing this book and it's called It's Never Too Late to Pivot Your Life. And it's literally like a step-by-step framework that I've used at different times to pivot my life from political staffer to lawyer, from lawyer to podcaster, to from, you know, different iterations in between. And I really want to share that with the EnvisionAirs. So my hope is that I'm going to start doing a lot more of these sort of live workshops, like let's do a life audit together. Let's work through how to actually take the next steps to transform your life, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's in a career, whether that's your health. You know, I just really want to help people in that way. I'm going to be also starting to do some one-on-one coaching. So anyone who's interested, who wants to, you know, they're kind of feeling stuck in a rut and not sure where to go, not sure what to do, reach out to me, and I will be able to help you, and we're going to work through it together. So one-on-one coaching, and it's going to be exciting. So that's something to look forward to.
Those are actually some amazing goals, and it makes a lot of sense for what you're doing to kind of help people on that next level, more live or coaching by, you know, Zoom or whatever. It's really cool. Now I know you've got a lot of listeners and viewers, and a lot of them are you know, watching you very closely, not only for your information but about your life and what you've done with your podcast to help you get out of, you know, a kind of rut wouldn't be the right word, but you know, just sitting in an office, not having any contact with people, working on your law contracts. So some of these people that are watching and listening are thinking, wow, I could really use something like this in my life. My life is X or Y or Z. If I podcast, maybe I can really improve. So it's a great idea. So if anybody is thinking that, what words of wisdom would you have for them as future podcasters?
I would honestly say, like, just do it, like try it, because you have nothing to lose. There's so many resources online now. Like you can literally just Google like how to start a podcast. And there's a wealth of knowledge of people out there that can help. Videos that are free, you can start. There are books that I think I started reading a book, which was like How to Have the Best Podcast Ever or something. I'll link it in the show notes. But essentially, it's like there's so many resources out there that are free, and if you want to pay, of course, there's paid resources. But yeah, I mean, just do it. You have nothing to lose. And honestly, it's one of the most enriching things because you will, again, it's like for the person you become having started a podcast, And if you don't like it, it's totally fine. Just like stop after 3 episodes or 5 episodes. It's not a big deal. So yeah, just do it. And if you have any questions, obviously reach out to me or Dr. Dave. But
yeah, and if I could just add one thing to that, it's really important with podcasting with somebody that's going to start a podcast, and that would be, I really do believe you need to podcast about something that you're totally passionate about. In other words, don't have a friend tell you, oh, if you podcast about this topic, a lot of people want to hear about this, and you're gonna make $1 million, but for some reason you're not interested in that topic, but you're just doing it for popularity. Don't do that.
yeah.
Much better to have just speak about something that you would love and that you're passionate about. And guess what? You will absolutely have listeners, followers, and viewers. It works that way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's funny because like, what do you think about this idea of a niche though? Because obviously I think you're a niche, right? You're a niche.
Oh, definitely. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm a niche. I mean, I think you can't get much more of a niche than how to microdose magic mushrooms for mental health. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. And so do you think that a niche is a good way to start? Or do you think, because you've also had different podcasts?
oh, absolutely. So in other words, I would not recommend like a really broad topic, and I'm just going to make this up. How to cure mental health issues. I'm totally made up. It's way too broad, and plus there's so many like that. So many people are doing it, and it's way too broad. So I think having a niche is crucial because again, you're going to exclude some people that are not interested in that niche. But too bad, you're going to have a lot of like rabid viewers and listeners and followers that are really interested and want to know more about that particular niche. So absolutely. And great question too.
Yeah. Good. All right.
So
amazing.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because when you made that call the other day and asked me if I wanted to do this, I'm thinking, wait a minute, she's had close to 50 different people that she's interviewed and she's choosing me. So I'm thinking, I don't even know if I'm good enough to do this, quite honestly, but I was flattered when you asked me, and I hope I lived up to your expectations. I really hope I did.
Oh my, of course you did. Dr. Dave, we love you. You're going to have to come on, like 100th episode back on, but we'll have you come on again talking about lots of different things, but including, I like the idea, like let's do another deep dive into like the magic mushroom, the microdosing element of it all, because I think it is really, really interesting. And people, you have just this wealth of knowledge, and we can even maybe do something about demystifying different aspects of it, even more so. And I think it'd be great. So no, you're always welcome. You are always welcome on the show. You know that. And you have been an amazing guest host. And I want to thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. And I'm just excited that I got to celebrate this milestone podcast with you. So thank you again so much. And listeners, thank you, EnvisionAirs. Thank you guys so much for just being here every week, showing up every week, trying to be the best version of ourselves, envisioning that and learning and just being curious about the world. So I thank you guys so much, and I'm sending you lots of love, and thank you all. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe and check out this video here.